Get us going. So welcome everyone. I'm calling to order the June meeting of the VOREC Steering Committee meeting, or of the VOREC Steering Committee. I'm Jackie Dagger, the Program Manager for the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative. And I'm just going to get us started on the agenda review because we have a lot to talk about today. We have some new faces joining us that we're going to have introduce themselves, and I want to make sure we have space for all of that. So there we go. So we're here at around 9 a.m. We're a little late, but that's okay. We'll make it up. We're doing welcome and introductions. We're going to jump into our business meeting shortly, and I am hoping we can keep it to 30 minutes. We have a lot to chat about, but I think we can do it. We're going to, around 9:40 a.m., have a conversation about VOREC action planning. We've been working really hard since the April meeting to outline some next steps and some exciting, have some exciting things to share with you. Around 10:20, we're going to talk about the VOREC Community Grant Program. We've also been working on fiscal year 23 funding and standing that up, so we have some information to share there. And before we start to wrap up the meeting, I do want to spend just a few minutes capturing some lessons learned today from potential skills or expertise we might be looking for in filling our open steering committee positions. I sent you on Friday a link to a survey about that. But we'll talk more about that at the end of the agenda, and then we'll open the floor up for public comment and other business and adjourn around 11 a.m. So big conversation we're expecting today. All right, so let's start with introductions. And I know we have a couple members of the public here with us. We're really excited to have you. We know people are busy professionals, and taking time out of the workday can be challenging to sit in on a 2-hour conversation. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate your interest in the work that the VOREC program is doing. As I've mentioned, as you joined, we do ask that members of the public stay muted with their cameras off during the meeting until we open the floor for public comment. But I do invite you at this time to go ahead and drop your name and organization or affiliation in the chat. We'd love to know who you are. All right, so I'm going to be asking steering committee members and staff who are playing an active role in today's meeting to come off mute and introduce themselves. So we'll start with steering committee members, and please, when I say your name, please go ahead and introduce yourself with your name and organization. And we're going to start with Becca.
Thanks, Jackie. I'm Becca Washburn. I'm the Director of Lands Administration and Recreation with FPR and the Chair of VOREC.
Great. Mike.
Good morning, everyone. Mike DeBonis. I am Executive Director of the Green Mountain Club, joining you from Moortown.
Great. Abby.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Abby Long. I'm the Executive Director of Kingdom Trails up here in the Northeast Kingdom.
And Shelby.
Morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Shelby Sims here, representing conservation issues, and I'm with the Trust for Public Land and coming to you from home office in Warren today.
Great. Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark Sherman from Outdoor Gear Exchange, and I am one of the co-founders and the president of the business at this point, and we're really excited to be getting close to opening day in Waitsfield at Riders Outpost, which is going to be our second door since 2000. I think I want to thank VOREC for its support of the whole outdoor industry of the project and everyone's enthusiasm to get this off the ground. It's been a huge lift, mostly not on our part, but excited to see it getting there. And I'm really excited that summer is here, and not so excited about the fact that I have a job. But it's great to see everybody.
Great. Good to see you, Mark. And that's really exciting news. Fraser.
Good morning. I am on the leadership team at the Orvis Company, leading strategic planning and I am also on the board of the Outdoor Industry Association.
Great, thanks, Fraser. I haven't been paying attention to who's maybe joined since we started introduction. So did I miss anyone on the steering committee who joined a little late? Great. And I do know about it. It looks like maybe there's a few folks who thought they might join but haven't yet. I know Commissioner Hanford had a conflict, as well as Josh Ryan and Drew Simmons, who won't be able to join us today. All right, so I'm going to have staff joining us and playing an active role in today's meeting introduce themselves. So please, when I call your name, go ahead and introduce yourself with your name, organization, and role today. And I'll start with Heather.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Pleased to join everyone this morning. I am the Heather Pelham, Commissioner of the Department of Tourism and Marketing, and sitting in for Josh, who, as Abby said, couldn't make it, and happy to give you some updates from the tourism side of the ACCD world.
Thanks, Heather. And Claire.
Hey everyone, my name is Claire Polfus and I serve as the Recreation Program Manager with FPR, working closely with Jackie and Becca.
Great, thanks, Claire. So like I said, we do have some new faces joining us today. I'm going to pause at moments during our meeting to have them introduce themselves because I think it's really exciting. They're joining us to help with some of this new work that we're starting. And with that, I'm just going to ask if I missed anybody who's steering committee member or staff playing an active role, and then I'm going to turn us into the business meeting. Great. All right. So let's get started on business meeting updates. And I am going to turn the floor over to Becca first to lead the approval of the minutes.
Thanks for that, Jackie. It sounds like we have two sets of minutes, February and April, and I'll take a motion to approve those two sets of minutes.
Motion
So
to
moved.
approve.
Move to approve.
Sounded like Fraser might have been the first. A second?
Abby,
Second.
second.
Abby
I
seconded.
win.
Any discussion on the minutes? Any amendments based on people's review? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving February and April's minutes, please say aye or signify with a hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Any opposed? No opposition. Any abstentions? Not seeing any. The minutes for February and April have passed.
Great. Thank you, Becca. All right. So I'm going to give some updates just from a program management perspective and some activities that have been happening since our meeting in April. So I've been pretty busy going to different events and speaking on behalf of the VOREC program at various different things in April and May. And I have a couple of things coming up. So I just wanted to share a review of some of that work. I, in April, attended the Confluence of States meeting in Annapolis, Maryland and Washington, D.C. And I shared a little bit about that ahead of that trip in April. But we were coming together, the Confluence of States, which I represent on behalf of Vermont's Office of Outdoor Recreation, the VOREC program being that office. The Confluence comes together twice a year. This was the first meeting of 2023. And we started off in Annapolis, Maryland, just to explore what the Office of Outdoor Recreation in Maryland has been working on with Annapolis. We learned a little bit about the revitalization of the Annapolis City Dock, which was pretty cool. They're looking at taking a parking area and turning it back into park space. And we got kind of a tour of some of the water destinations outside of Annapolis, which was pretty fun. We then traveled to Washington, D.C. to join the Outdoor Industry Association for their Capital Summit. which was a really great, cool event. Fraser, I know you were there too, and I definitely welcome you to add anything, but it was really neat to convene with Outdoor Industry Association, meet some of the folks who were there for that Capital Summit, and speaking with delegations on Capitol Hill about outdoor recreation and the importance of outdoor recreation investments. So I know, Fraser, you got to go speak with Peter Welch's staff and talk with them a little bit about the fact that we have an Office of Outdoor Recreation, we have the VOREC program, and we've been making investments into outdoor recreation at the local level. And I was just curious if you wanted to share anything from that experience.
I think just a couple of things. Firstly, the way that we were grouped was that I was on the Northeast team, so that meant that Orvis was with Nemo Equipment and also with LL Bean, and so we visited offices for Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And we were also paired with the Maine Office of Outdoor Recreation, so that was really interesting for me as well, just to learn about everything that Maine is doing and their partnerships and discussions with Jackie and how close everyone is across the states in terms of, sharing what's going on and what they're working on and all those things. But I think one of the most powerful things about being in DC with the Outdoor Industry Association is that we can really punch above our weight because we're a group of brands, manufacturers, agencies that are really aligned in our values and what's important to us while being competitors in the marketplace. And so we show up in DC and we want to talk about things like outdoor recreation, things about like participation, access, climate, and it's very well received by senators, congresspeople, and their staff because it's not really a controversial item. Everyone can understand the value of being outside. And so we're welcomed, and generally those meetings go very well. There's not really much that's controversial, and everyone's leaning in and wants to support. So that was my first time being in person on the Hill. I have done that virtually over COVID, but it was really a great experience. I'm really psyched, Jackie, that you were able to be there. And the Peter Welch's office was the last office of my day, so I was very practiced and ready to go. And I felt like we had a really great meeting, and I felt very fortunate to be able to talk about VOREC and Vermont's Office of Outdoor Recreation with Peter Welch's staff. And so I hope I get the chance to do that again, honestly.
Awesome. Thanks, Fraser. It was so great to see you there, and I'm really glad you were able to make that event. Shelby, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah. Thanks, Jackie. And Fraser, that's a great report out. Appreciate hearing some of those kind of nuances. I was curious if you were, and I'm sorry if I missed this, were you meeting with delegations from multiple different states, including Vermont? And if so, were there variations? I mean, it sounded like it was a lot of warm topics that were well received, as you mentioned, non-controversial, but was it a Vermont focus or multiple state delegations from your part?
Multiple state. I mean, I was paired in with Northeast brands, manufacturers, et cetera, but we had a lot of groups. There were 50 plus who came from across the country. So there was a Northwest group, there was a Southwest group, and there were all of you would imagine Patagonia, the North Face, like all of some of the bigger brands, but also smaller brands, rep agencies, et cetera, all members of the Outdoor Industry Association, and all meeting with different representation across the country. And having done homework, focused on different topics to discuss. And if outdoor offices of recreation were part of the various states they were representing, that would be included in kind of the talking points and discussions. But for me, in the Northeast, it was Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, Congress
Yeah.
people and senators.
Yeah.
And it was a full day. I mean, we had 7 or 8 sessions, and in most cases, the Congress man or woman or senator were there to meet us, which was really very cool. Unfortunately, Peter Welch couldn't be there. I was dying to meet him in person, but that didn't work out for me. But his staff was wonderful.
Great. Yeah, it really
Thanks.
was a great day. I would add that while there were delegations going to the Hill, the confluence of states members were meeting separately. We were meeting to talk about the structure of that group as an organization and defining better what the purpose of that, what our purpose should be moving forward. I think, like VOREC, and I've said this here before, the confluence of states is still a pretty young group, and so we're having a lot of the conversations that VOREC is having about our purpose and our goals and what we work on together. So we did a lot of that, and we also met with Dennis Alvord, who is the Economic Development Agency's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Economic Development. You all may remember we've shared updates here before about the EDA funding that the Department of Tourism and Marketing has received for tourism and recreation. And we were able to thank him for those investments, as well as talk a little bit about how that funding is being used, which I know I'm excited Heather is here. She'll share a little bit more about how that work is moving forward when we get to that part of our business meeting. All right, so just moving along, me as well as Kelly Alt, executive director of the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance, traveled to New Hampshire last month for the first in-person meeting to plan for the 2024 Northern Forest Outdoor Recreation Symposium, which is also really exciting. So I think folks will remember there was a previous event, a previous regional symposium that was held, I believe, in 2017 at the Mount Washington Hotel. And this event is a follow-up event to that. So a lot of our planning conversations are just beginning, but at a high level, what we're conceptualizing is, a follow-up to that first event. So checking in, that first event really spurred offices of outdoor recreation being created in a lot of our states. And so it's intended to be sort of a check-in on the work that those offices are doing, but also a real opportunity to convene regionally on some of the challenges that we're all experiencing around strengthening outdoor recreation economies and moving those forward. So we're really hoping that we can bring stakeholders together at a regional level to talk about how we work on some of these challenges across state lines. So more to come there and a lot more planning that's going to be happening this year and early next year. That event is planned for mid-May. I also just wanted to quickly share that I have been participating a little bit in various smaller events around the state of Vermont. So I participated in an event that the Preservation Trust of Vermont put on in early May, which is really cool. And Abby was also able to attend that event. It's cool to overlap with Abby in that way, but thinking about that nexus between historic preservation in Vermont, because so many of our buildings are historic and old, and how we think about those buildings as an asset for outdoor recreation and our outdoor recreation economy. So really cool to be there and be able to talk about VOREC, be able to talk about the grant program and how we might be a resource for some of that work. And hear how communities around Vermont are seeing or experiencing that intersection between historic preservation and outdoor recreation. I was able to speak on a panel at the Vermont Community Development Association meeting on May 18th. We were talking about common challenges that municipalities are facing in developing outdoor recreation economies and helping think through how to move forward on some of those challenges. Earlier this week, I was on a panel that the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable held. That was mainly for like confluence of states and state outdoor business alliances, talking with Kelly Alt about how we've been able to connect Outdoor Business Alliance and the Office of Outdoor Rec here in the state of Vermont. And then next week, I sent you all a heads up that the Northern Forest Center is convening a panel with the Office of Outdoor Recreation in Maine and New Hampshire, where we're also going to be talking about outdoor rec economy regionally in the Northern Forest. So I hope you guys will be able to tune in for that. I think it's going to be a good discussion, and you could add a lot of benefit to it. Great. And then my final update is that we have been really moving to execute grants for the fiscal year 22 VOREC community grant funded communities. And out of the 24 communities that we're granting to, we have 4 agreements left to execute. So we're really excited to have most of those agreements almost executed. It's huge. We're already seeing reimbursement requests coming in from folks who have been able to get started on work. And I hope to share a little bit more with you about that towards the end of our agenda today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Becca for updates from the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation.
Thanks, Jackie. Before I jump in and just provide a few brief updates, I did notice Mark's comment in the chat about wanting to do VOBA's updates, but having a hard stop at 10:30. So if you want him to jump in now, or you'd like to have him follow mine, we have time, but I just wanted to pause and allow for that if you needed to modify the agenda at all.
No, that's great. I do hope we're wrapped up with business meeting by 10:30 and that, Mark, you're able to join for some of the action planning conversation, because I think that's going to be really great. But why don't we go ahead and have you do it just so you don't feel pressured by time?
Great, thanks a lot. I've got notes from Jackie, or from Kelly, but essentially a recent strategic planning has been done to determine areas where VOBA can assist outdoor sector in driving statewide economic impact and growth for outdoor businesses. And that's been a really informative process. And the board and the member work groups are moving forward on 4 priority areas. The first one, I think, aligns with what Jackie already talked about, which is serving as a convener in networking and education events to deepen the business and multi-sector relationships by exchanging resources and learning together. And that's being part of those events and sort of augmenting what VOREC is doing and being another voice, VOREC being a active voice for the general community and for the state. VOBA jumps in as a separate voice around the needs of businesses that may not, that are very specific, whereas the state, I think, has far more constituents to deal with than just the outdoor industry. That then goes to the next step, which is trying to facilitate business-to-business collaborations and even mentorships that are designed to focus on innovation in the industry, sustainability, and the biggest piece that we've added since George Floyd's murder in 2020 is really focusing on inclusivity in a very, very homogeneic industry that's also stuck in a very homogeneic state. But I can tell you from the OGE standpoint, we're starting to see a really good change in the other direction. But I think more importantly, when we look at inclusivity, is that we really have to reconsider what that means and what diversity means, because I think, for the longest time in this industry, diversity was women. And then it started to become BIPOC and other visible differences. And then more recently, I think we are aware of the need for the LGBTQIA+ community to feel more welcome. I think it's a big leap for a lot of us who are very active and use our bodies actively to be outside, but to really consider how we can bring the more disabled community in with great resources like Vermont Adaptive. And then more recently, as I'm starting to look into that, I've taken over DEI in our business. Miguel has moved on to what I think next week is a new life in Connecticut. But yeah, he left us about a month ago, but he's leaving the state in a week. is I'm taking over the DEI piece, and one of the real messages right now is to step outside of what we think of as DEI and start looking at cultural life experiences. And I think that's something that we've heard throughout this, throughout what VOREC's been working on, which is that, you know, the people in Irisburg do not have the same resources in many ways as people in Burlington and people in Middlebury and people in Rutland and Bennington, et cetera. And so taking into account those differences is something that VOREC can do and VOBA can do, because realistically, we are limited in how much diversity we can support in the traditional means, but that doesn't mean that Vermont isn't a diverse state. And that's something that I think is a leap of awareness for everyone. We're also working on trying to grow business opportunities within the outdoor communities by creating access to technical services that some of the businesses don't have. You know, OGE is very fortunate with our size. We're over 120 people, and with 28 years of history and a fairly large presence on Church Street, we have resources that we have access to that I think a lot of smaller businesses don't, but they need. And then finally, advancing careers by providing access to training and marketing career pathways. So looking out and just connecting people and making sure that businesses like Vermont Glove and Sam Hooper can find the people that he needs. I recently learned that he's working on converting an old, I forget whether it's a hotel or a school, into housing for employees so that he can attract people to help do the work he needs that otherwise wouldn't be able to find housing in Vermont. So I think it's great that we have businesses with that kind of forward thinking, but I think as a state, we need to sort of make sure we're jumping on that too and understand that if people can't find a place to live or find the community resources they need, they can't come to work in the state or even move within the state to work. And that limits our ability as an industry to provide jobs and find people to fill those jobs. So that's the update.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And I'll just add that I really appreciate your points about diversity, equity, and inclusion and the need for our sector as an outdoor recreation sector to be addressing that more head on, and for us as a program, as the VOREC program, to be addressing that more head on. And I think that's something that's going to come up throughout the conversation this morning, more with action planning is and some of the things that we've been hearing through the assessment that we completed back in April as well. So I'll pause there and turn the floor back over to Becca for now.
Thanks a lot, Jackie. And thanks for that update, Mark. That was great. I also just want to share that when I look skyward, it's not because I'm gazing off at the heavens. I am taking notes with Claire for the meeting because we have not replaced the wonderful Caroline. So that's what's happening, is taking notes in the background and following the agenda. So I'm not just staring off into space. As for updates from FPR standpoint, I'm really delighted. Many of you have heard through email or maybe have had the pleasure of interacting with Danny Fitzko. She is officially our new FPR commissioner. We're super pumped. And effort is underway to replace the director of forests so that she can fully focus on her role as FPR commissioner. She was not available. She's actually on the coast of Maine for a wedding this weekend, but she will be invited to come to our August in-person meeting and be able to share and meet you all and talk a little bit about her vision. So we're pretty excited about that. Jackie, did I screw up? Is that what the hand was for? Or was it like, woo, woo?
It was celebrating. It was a celebration.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Yeah, really psyched about this. Quick legislative wrap-up items. Anybody that's been following the news or paying attention to what's been happening at the close of the session knows that there will be a veto session starting on June 20th. The budget was vetoed. I expect, we will come out of that unscathed. I think we're all hopeful that there's a resolution to the issues that folks are figuring out between the legislative and the executive branch. And really the only thing that I feel like may be on the table is the $1 million in matching funds for outdoor recreation grants. That was an appointment of one-time funding based on the governor's interest in outdoor recreation and supporting small communities. So while I don't expect that to be affected, that is really in the outdoor rec sphere. That is the one-time funding that is different from our typical base budget. H126 is on the governor's desk. I think we all feel pretty optimistic about the outcome of that bill and have begun in earnest to really position ourselves to be in a strong position to lead that planning effort and inventory of conserved lands with support from VHCB. We're meeting with the Vermont Center for Geographic Information next week to think about what role they can help play in the effort to do this inventory. We're in the final stages of hiring a contractor that would support the planning initiative and help with the inventory work. And expect that part of the conversation next week will include what it means to transition to a structure that follows the goals of the bill if it is passed, and really how inclusive we want this planning process to be for Vermonters. So I expect VOREC and others in particular will be hearing more about the different stakeholder engagement and the roles that we expect our partners to be able to play in this process. And we'll certainly be providing updates directly to this committee. The only other piece that is worth noting, if the bill passes, if it's successful, it does include funding for A&R to hire a staff position, a 3-year limited service position that Julie has directed would be, our secretary has directed would be in lands administration and recreation, and would be a land acquisition coordinator that would help coordinate A&R's participation in this planning process, as well as increase the pace of conservation by adding another staff person that could be advancing conservation projects. So feeling really excited about the pathway for that bill, and doing our best to ramp up and be prepared to carry out the goals of that bill. The other sort of big exciting thing that's expected to be underway this summer, and Abby will certainly touch on this too, in all likelihood, is working with the Trails and Greenways Council. We saw a ton of interest and excitement around outdoor recreation, the rec economy, sustainable funding for stewardship for outdoor recreation. And what we heard from the administration and from the legislature was, bring us back a plan. Tell us what this looks like and help us understand how the legislature can propose solutions to advancing the outdoor rec economy in Vermont. So we're excited to begin working with the council on that. And I believe you're likely to meet or hear from Sharon, who was hired with support from VOREC funding to help staff up the Trails and Greenways Council and really help them step in and engage, which is awesome. We also, as a management team, one of the first things that Danny has done with us, we'll be meeting next week for a retreat on policy work, thinking about what are the policy priorities we should be considering as a department, more broadly as an agency, and thinking about what that looks like in preparation for this upcoming legislative session, as well as the longer game. Are there things that we could be working towards that may not be solutions that we could achieve in this next session, but we should be building towards now? So that retreat is going to take place next week. And from there, I expect there will be more dialogue and engagement from stakeholders and partners about what it looks like to pull together really a comprehensive list of the policy priorities we should be thinking about and engaging the legislature and the governor's administration on. And then the other sort of interesting interface with recreation, and really one that I think if Josh Ryan were here, he would lean into, is just when we're thinking about the outdoor rec economy, and we feel incredibly privileged in the opportunity to be thinking about what it means to participate in outdoor recreation. There are others that are struggling with issues that are way, way more complex and way more challenging than that. We have done a lot of work in the last week to help prepare park staff for what we expect to be folks that are losing their housing security through the hoteling program and are looking for other options and looking at state forests or state parks as potential solutions for some housing security for their families, for their children, and really doing our best to connect them with services that can help them find something that is more appropriate than our park system, but recognizing that that's something that we're likely to be working on, and wanting our seasonal staff who, are maybe our sons or daughters or our cousins that don't have a lot of experience with this, really giving them the tools to have that compassion and be thinking about and helping folks stay safe and take care of their families to the best of their ability. So just wanting to sort of shine a light on that cross section between some of the really serious challenges our state is facing right now and how that shows up in the recreation world. Pivoting now, Sherry Winnie, many of you have interfaced with her. She's the longtime Recreation Trails Program Manager. She was my boss when I was in my early 20s and thinking about being a public servant. She is retiring on July 6th. She's officially done with work. She welcomed her 5th grandchild into the world the day before yesterday and is on her way to Seattle. So we're recruiting for a new grants program person, and because of the timely addition of LWCF, National Park Service admin funding, we're likely going to be making an ask that would result in increased capacity and allowing us to restructure our grant staff in a way that I think will bring some consolidation to our grant making, some efficiencies, make the interface with the public and those that are interested in finding resources for their great recreation ideas, making that just simpler for them. So excited that Sherry's moving on to be the best grandmother ever, and we have this awesome opportunity to build on her legacy with grant making, to rethink and look at how FPR makes grants to the nonprofits and municipalities here in Vermont and businesses here in Vermont through VOREC, Rec Trails, and the LWCF program. So with that, those are my updates. I don't know if folks have questions or comments. I'll pause before handing it back over to Jackie.
Just because we're a little behind schedule, I'm going to encourage people to reach out to Becca with questions if you have them about any of those updates. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on, so definitely send Becca an email if you have any outlying thoughts. And I also noticed that Claire put the position description application in the chat. So please share that out with anyone you think would be a good fit. All right, I'm going to move us ahead, and I'm going to go to Heather next to share updates on behalf of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
Great, thank you, Jackie, and good morning again, everybody. I can start as well with legislative updates as far as tourism is concerned. We did not have an ask this year for tourism funding, but we did have an ask to increase our base budget for the work that we do with relocation, and we were successful. So we had asked for a $1 million increase in our base to support the regional relocation network, and I would emphasize that also includes retention activities, so that when we are, looking to support folks who want to move here to the state, we're also thinking about what it means for them to then stay here and really become part of our communities. So, nothing is final until we actually have a signed budget. But, we are hopeful that will stay in the budget and will really, it allows us to do the work we've been doing for relocation through the Think Vermont program that we never had funding for specifically to be able to continue with that. So that is exciting for us. In terms of the update I can give you, that Commissioner Hanford would have, I will do my best to talk about S100, which was pretty much the signature bill that the agency worked on in terms of the housing crisis that Becca was just mentioning. That was signed this week. That is the HOME Act, it stands for Housing Opportunities Made for Everyone. I would say essentially and I am borrowing from the press release here, so forgive me, it modernizes local zoning and land use regulations that allows for higher density development in areas that have water and sewer service. And I've heard Josh speak about this. We were both at an event yesterday, and he really stress the fact that this was a compromise. So not everybody got what they wanted. There was a lot of work that went into this, but I think it speaks to the balance that everyone is trying to create. So that, some of the key provisions expand programs like VHIP, which helps to, bring units online that don't meet accessibility or other housing standards. It helps to align some of the local and land use policies with state policies to be able to build more housing in the state's designated centers. So think, downtowns, village centers, and so forth. I'm not sure how deep folks are into some of these land use rules, but you've heard of like the 10-5-5 rule, where that's when Act 250 is triggered. That was expanded to 25-5-5, so that would be 25 units within 5 miles within 5 years that would receive an exemption from Act 250, and that's for a trial 3-year period. There is a sunset on that, but that will be interesting to see how that plays out. And then the bill also sort of standardized some municipal zoning in residential districts, again, served by water and sewer, by lowering some parking thresholds and increasing building and lot standards, and specifically permitting multi-unit dwellings and emergency shelters. There's other provisions about funding, which might total up to about 90 million. But again, we have to kind of wait and see how the budget plays out before we know that for sure. So if you have specific questions, I'm going to say, talk to Josh, but that gives you kind of like the overview of where we are at S100. Other things I wanted to mention to you folks, one, just quickly, Memorial Valley Rail Trail. I think everybody, knows we're very excited that is, fully open. We had a little bit of a struggle to find a great day to pick to not have a grand opening, but we're calling it a celebration. We have finally landed on July 15th. And this will be quite an event. The governor is actually going to ride the entire 93 miles of the trail on his bike. And so that's pretty exciting. He will be leaving Swanton at 7:30 a.m. There will be a couple water break stops along the way in various communities along the trail, with a celebration event around 12:30, 1 o'clock in Morrisville that will also include Senator Sanders. And then a couple more hours on the trail, a few more stops, ending in St. Johnsbury around 6:30 in the evening. And the folks in St. Johnsbury are also pulling together an end of the day celebration as well. So a really great day to celebrate the trail. I know that there's some, I don't know if this has come through to you, Mark, but I know that VOBA was kind of tapped to think about bike shops and gear folks who might be able to come to some of those water breaks. The thought was that we could have a bike shop at each water break representative to, maybe service the governor's bike, but otherwise just shine a light on a local business in that area who, can help provide services to support trail users. This is coming together. This is early days, but just want to give folks a heads up. Those are some of the ideas that we've been thinking about. And the idea is that folks can join the governor along the ride. So I have this vision of the Pied Piper and who knows how many people trailing the governor on his bike. So that's LVRT. So I did want to, I know I'll try and go through this quickly, Jackie, but, in terms of EDA funding, as has been mentioned, this is something that we've been prepping for quite a long time. This is ARPA funding, different from the ARPA funding the state has already received, specifically for travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation. Every state was given a specific amount proportional to the losses in visitor spending due to the pandemic. So the state grant for Vermont is 10.4 million. It's been a very long process to get EDA to kind of agree to a scope of work of what we can do with that. But we are looking to be able to put out some RFPs in the next month or so to start that work. Destination marketing is always at the core of what we do, and that is an eligible expense for this funding. But the funding also gives us an opportunity to dive into more destination stewardship type issues. So we'll be using that money in basically 3 major buckets: destination marketing, destination management and industry support, and then outdoor recreation or destination development, if you will. So in destination marketing, we will be doing a new set of visitation research. So that includes in-market intercept surveys, visitor perception surveys, and resident sentiment surveys, which I think will be very informative to this group as well. We will be doing asset creation, video, photography. We're going to be doing a brand study, and kind of synthesizing that visitation research into new campaign development and brand work. And then we'll have a marketing implementation budget to kind of push out those assets. But in the destination management space, and again, this is where I would love to have everyone here more involved. We are going to be doing a 5-year strategic destination management plan, which will also include a data dashboard. So we're going to be doing some data collection work so we can better report on visitation and visitor spending, including an economic impact study. We've specifically called out outdoor recreation to be part of that. We're also going to be doing some more regional marketing sub-awards, so similar with what we've been able to do with recovery funds in the last couple of years. And we're also working to support a hospitality management continuing education program that's being developed at UVM. So, and then in the outdoor rec, we also have another project that's in that kind of workforce development space with the creation of boot camp workshops. It does have to go through an RFP process, but there's been a lot of work by folks involved here on what that would look like, which would be, training for bike mechanics, ski and snowboard techs, trail builders, and trail builder trainers. And also trying to frame out some additional technical assistance capacity for communities who might be looking to apply for VOREC grants and so forth through some of this money. And then finally, a chunk of this will be a subaward to our friends at FPR to be able to accomplish some projects that they have identified that there isn't another obvious funding source for, but certainly are a priority for recreation and public safety and all the things we do together. So that includes a project at the Bingham Falls recreation area, a project at Smilbridge Notch at the Route 108 corridor, and then some work to rehabilitate our fire towers on state lands. So I would defer to Becca for the details on that, but very exciting that that's all coming together. And then 2 other really quick things I wanted to mention. In terms of this summer, we've done a couple of projects with the Matador Network. It's a travel platform that has done some really great video work for us. And we are going to be working with them this summer on a new video project that's focused on sustainability and our sustainability ethic here in Vermont. And, obviously we didn't start this. You guys are as part of this as anyone. So we're looking to kind of engage folks on that as we kind of put together more storytelling about, what it means to come to Vermont and our stewardship ethic that drives that. And then the other plug I just want to put out there is we are starting to talk to folks about the 2024 eclipse. So I don't know if this has come up in your networks yet. It seems to be, everyone's like, what's going on? So, this is not something that the state is going to direct. Say this wasn't really my idea, but then again, it's going to be great. It's going to be April. Who knows if it's going to be snowing? We know that everything's going to be muddy. It's going to be awesome. But seriously, we are looking to really talk to folks in their local communities to understand what people are planning. I mean, lodging is already tight. We will do our best to spread folks around the state, but we really need to know who's putting viewing events together and just really trying to help folks think now about where you do want people and where you don't want people. So, I'm
Thanks,
kind of
Heather.
trying to do. Okay, so
Thanks.
just keep in touch with where we want to have those conversations. So I hope everyone here is on our tourism industry newsletter. We're going to be putting a call out for folks who want to stay more in touch with eclipse planning. All right, I'll stop.
So much great information. Shelby has put a question in the chat that I'm hoping you can answer by dropping the response in the chat. I'm going to move forward with VTGC updates and turn it over to Abby.
You can count on me to be quick, Jackie. Vermont Trails and Greenway Council, we had an in-person all-day annual meeting. It was really fun. It was beautiful. It was at Ascutney Outdoor Center mid-May. And basically, it was just a time to come together. We recapped our year. The year prior, we had set 3 main priorities, defining and having clear communication with, or having clear goals for the organization, strengthening our relationship with FP&R, and then of course better engaging and growing our membership. And quite honestly, we knocked them all out of the park. But we were able to do that. Some major accomplishments this year was a revitalized commitment to consistent communication with FP&R. There wasn't a meeting we had all year that Becca and then Claire, when she joined, they were zooming in and attending meetings. So we're very grateful for that. We developed and had very clear legislative priorities. So the entire VTGC organization was on the same page throughout the year. We even engaged, had a few-year hiatus, but we engaged again with the government affairs liaison to help support those priorities in the State House. And we started kind of afresh in the State House. We really worked on establishing just awareness of Vermont Trails and Greenway Council. And then, which I'll get into more, we did make a commitment to ourselves to hire a new program manager, which more to come. And I do want to mention that I think I've been involved with VTGC for the past 5 years that I've been in the state of Vermont, and I think we're in a really, truly incredible position relative to last year. And I do want to give a shout out. I believe that's truly due to our one of our co-chairs, Nick Bennett, the ED of VIMBA, has been vital to the evolution of Vermont Trails and Greenway Council. We're very, I'm really appreciative of having him at the helm. So, other things we've been able to tick off, looking ahead, we're in the midst of drafting an MOU with FP&R. I think Becca alluded to that a little bit about having strengthening that relationship. We are preparing to build long-term work plans. Of course, continuing the more active and engaged membership. And then, which I won't get into details, but the H85, the SCORP, the 30 by 30, those are all happening together. So there's really potential for enormous progress there. Of course, we just didn't celebrate all rainbows and unicorns all day. We did discuss challenges and the opportunities that would come out of that, updating our goals for key areas of work and how we'll be pursuing and getting these goals done this next year. There was a lot of breakout sessions, discussions, brainstorming, and kind of through all that, those activities, 3 new goals, priorities emerged. We'll be continuing to develop and sustaining a thriving Vermont Trails and Greenway Council. Major one this upcoming year, we want better trails. We want clearer BMPs, tools, and support for those trails. How can we ensure all those trails existing and new are meeting a high standard, the Vermont standard? And then, of course, landowner support and recognition, maybe even focusing on a little bit of current use and how recreation could be a part of that incentive program. And before I hand it over to somebody new and exciting, I do want to give a shout out to the VARPA conference, the Vermont Parks and Rec Association conference that is going to be September 29th and 29th and 30th at Killington. It's the 80th annual conference for that organization, and there will be a trail symposium. So VTGC has joined forces with them. There'll be a trail track throughout the 2 days, and we're hoping, of course, to broaden that conference. But then there'll be, opportunities for, again, education, and to kind of mold your normal, I shouldn't say normal, but the outdoor rec and the, traditional recreation. I'm stumbling over myself now, but please, everyone attend, spread the word. It will be a wonderful 2 days of fun. And then we did have, the normal stuff at an annual meeting, elections. The new co-chairs will be Nick again, and then the motorized voice will be Cindy Locke from VAST. And the most exciting part, I would love to introduce Sharon as our we have a hired staff to help drive everything I was just discussing for the first time ever. This is huge, just to add to the capacity of Vermont Trails and Greenway Council. And Sharon, I would love for you to say hi and introduce yourself quick.
Sure. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, Jackie, and such a good summary of what the Trails and Greenways Council has been up to. It's been a very busy year for the council, and I came on the first day was actually the annual meeting. So I started out with about 10 hours a week, and just last week I'm up to half time. So it has been hit the ground running and getting to know FPR and the board of directors and our stakeholders within the Trails and Greenways Council, and positioning ourselves to be better able to be the voice of and for the trails community, taking stock of what we've done in the past, what's worked well, where we want to go in the future. Where, as Abby said, I've been meeting along with Nick to design that cooperative agreement, and we'll be taking part in the RTP improvement process that Claire is leading. We're really looking at how to broaden the membership. There's a lot of players that are at the table, but a lot of folks that aren't at the table as well. So who are they that would benefit from our collective think tank, and how can we reach them is the big question that I'm kind of circling around right now. So I am looking, we're pulling our RFP together for finding a website developer to improve our website, putting an e-news together so that we can be ready to go, hopefully by the end of the summer, with some better marketing materials, some better messaging, so people can understand the value of what we bring to the State House in terms of being the voice for the trails community, and also how we can take all the information that's out there and better support everything from municipalities to volunteer-run organizations to statewide groups. And there's a lot of great work to be done. It's kind of, my head is swirling a lot from all of the activity that's happening between SCORP and VOREC and lots of other actions that all seem to be, if they're coming together very well, that you folks have all been leading and seeing where we can insert ourselves and be the greatest functioning organization that we can be. So that's where we're at for now. And I look forward to being part of this group and seeing how I can contribute our energies.
Thanks, Sharon. We're really excited to have you on board and playing a really key role at the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council. And I know VTGC is also really excited to have you. Abby, I'm going to move us forward unless you have any other updates to share. Perfect. All right. So that was a really robust set of business meeting updates. So much is going on right now, and I think it's a really good segue into what we've been thinking about with VOREC action planning and how we're moving forward with bringing these different processes together and understanding how we, as a program and a partnership, a collective impact network, want to be a really important player, bringing together a lot of these different things that are going on. So I'm going to talk a little bit. We wrapped up our action plan assessment activity, which we started back in October of 2022. This past April, it was a really, I think, good discussion in a couple of groups about the actions in the 2018 VOREC action plan. And so what I want to do right now is talk to you about what we've been working on since April. We have some new faces in our group that I want to give the opportunity to introduce themselves. And then I want to talk with you a little bit about what we're imagining a high level work plan is for accomplishing the action planning work that we've been talking about for quite a long time now. So really exciting stuff. First, I'm just going to share a couple of notes of progress. So since April, I reviewed the outcomes from the action plan assessment activity. I shared the full spreadsheet with you all last Friday when I sent the agenda out. And so you have that in your email inboxes, and as well as attached to this calendar hold if you want to dig into the real nitty gritty of what came out of those conversations. but I will share a few of my takeaways here in just a moment. I've also been meeting with Claire and Becca to discuss the alignment of VOREC action planning with the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, or SCORP. You've heard a couple of mentions to that in this meeting, and we've talked about it in the past. These are going to be two really big planning processes. And instead of tapping similar people multiple times, we really want to make sure that we're capturing feedback from people at the same time, as well as using these two documents, the outcomes of these two processes, in alignment, because they really do go together. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I also met with Jennifer Waite from the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program, and we've been talking about this high-level work plan, and Jennifer's been getting us started on thinking about how do we tackle this really big undertaking that we're about to begin. So with that, I want to turn the floor over to Jennifer for a moment, and then also probably over to Claire, because we have another new face joining us who's helping support the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. So Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you first.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Waite. I'm with the National Park Service Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program, which we call RTCA because that's too long a title. I started talking to Jackie last year, and she was talking about the strategic planning process. And our program is a conservation assistance program. So basically a grant from the program is a grant of my time to help the group get done whatever it is they're doing. And so, for example, I have about 5 or 6 projects going on in the state right now. We've been doing a lot of accessible trails, Tucker Mountain, Heart Lake in New York, Heartland here at our elementary school, working with state historic sites, like Calvin Coolidge, and doing assessments of sort of path of the visitor and looking at accessibility there as well. Been doing this for about 30 years. So Sharon, I worked with your dad, your dear dad, George, with the very start of the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council. So I was just sitting here listening to all these updates from all these groups, and I don't think those early VTGC folks 30 years ago could ever have imagined so many vibrant groups that are all dealing with all the aspects of recreation in Vermont, and it's incredibly exciting. We're all still here and still thriving, and so many more groups are out there looking out for all of these important issues and recognizing the value in the state of conservation and recreation and our very identity going forward. So it's just incredibly satisfying listening to you guys this morning. So my role, Jackie and I have been talking about this work planning process, working with partners to kind of figure out how to carry out the strategic plan and make it as useful and specific as possible. We can bring resources to the facilitation and outreach process. We can bring resources for the production of some kind of a useful tool, marketing, outreach, strategic plan, summary, whatever format works for you guys, that you can take to the legislature for updates, that you can use as your working document going forward to follow your pillars and have specific actions and timelines that go with all of those. So those are the pieces that we're going to help with. Really excited about it, and I'm happy to join you guys this morning.
Thanks, Jennifer. Really excited to have you on board and supporting this, and you all will, I expect, to be seeing a lot more of Jennifer in the coming months. So with that, I want to give Claire you the opportunity to talk about SCORP and the support that you're bringing on board for that process.
Yeah, sure. So many of you know that we are in the process of updating the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan for Vermont. And the process has been changed a bit, and we have a little bit more time, and we're using the summer to really take a deep dive in how to make the process as inclusive as possible. And we're really excited because we were able to bring on an intern from UVM. And I'm going to let Dexter take it away and introduce the project a little bit further for all of you. So Dexter, if you want to, yeah, there you are.
Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Dexter. As Claire said, I'm a UVM student and I'm interning with FPR this summer to try and make the score process more inclusive to all Vermonters and better represent marginalized communities that don't get outdoors a lot, to make sure that the outdoors is just an inclusive place for everybody.
So
Great.
Dexter is working a lot right now on research, and then we'll transition to reaching out to groups across Vermont, including probably some of yours. So expect an email introduction coming up late June or early July.
Perfect, really exciting.
Dex,
And oh, go ahead.
Dexter, if you can, I would just hope that I can connect with you outside of this environment, because it sounds like we've got a lot to share and would love to get you involved in some of what Outdoor Gear Exchange is doing.
Awesome. Really excited to have you, Dexter. And if you need Mark's information to get in touch, I'm happy to share that email. Or Mark, I'm happy to share Dexter's info with you and further connect you. Sharon, do you have something to add real quick?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo that as well. I'm putting an RFP together for the website and want to have a section on inclusivity. And since we're just kind of starting some of the work on how to unpack resources that are out there so that communities can tap into them for resources and trail building, I need that information, whatever you're pulling together. So I'd love to have a meeting with you as well and help craft some of that information.
Great, awesome.
I'd love it if I don't know how VOREC can get involved in this, but I just want to remind everyone that A, it's Pride Month, and also B, Juneteenth is coming up, and it's something that we should recognize.
Sorry, Mark, to clarify, as a program?
Not so much as a program, but I think if there's any kind of documentation or marketing that we can do, or if we're talking about building inclusivity into the state, and the outdoor recreation resources and having that messaging be prevalent, I think it's critical to recognize the things that are going on in the world that are DEI related. So we have, it's Pride Month, so we should be recognizing that, because that's about inclusivity. And Juneteenth it's not a celebration, it's an awareness, but it's a day that is really significant to BIPOC individuals, or specifically African Americans. And if we want to reach out to these groups, we need to recognize the dates and the events and the things that are important to them, and not just expect them to come to us. So,
yeah,
we know that's coming up. So what a great opportunity to say, hey, it's Juneteenth, and what is freedom without access to the outdoors? We want to recognize that's important. Something along those lines.
Great. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think as we sort of hope to engage more with diversity, equity, and inclusion as a program and help support that in the work that we do, we absolutely need to be taking steps to show folks, not just ask folks to participate, that this is work that we care deeply about. And I think, Dexter, you being here and helping us with the engagement on the SCORP is really important and a really big piece of that. And Mark, I also really appreciate your point about making sure we're recognizing those dates, and we'll think more about how to make that happen. What I'd like to do right now, I know some folks have to leave us. I do have a presentation of outcomes from our April meeting, and then I want to roll through sort of what we've been envisioning the high-level work plan for action planning to look like. So I am going to share my screen and roll through the action plan assessment results. And can you all see my slides and I can't see you. So if you can verbally let
Yes.
me know. Great.
We can see them.
I can see them,
Perfect.
but they're not in present mode, just so you know.
Yes, I'm not going to present because what I'd like to do is as I go through these, if you all have comments or questions, I would love for you to chime in and I can just take some notes as we go along. So again, going back to April, we had this action plan assessment activity. It was sort of the follow-up discussion to the conversation we started in October. The purpose of that activity was to review the 39 actions that were identified in 2018 as part of the action plan, understand where we are on those actions, and then also talk about, how should VOREC engage with these actions? Are we leading this action? Are we working with partners on this action? How do we want to move forward from where we are now? So I took all of the data that we got from those two small group discussions and pulled it into one spreadsheet that I shared with you with the notes. There's a couple of recommendations highlighted in there for changes that group suggested as well. So I encourage you to take a look at those. And a couple of things we still need to work out, but generally I think we got to a really good place. So the 39 actions, I'll also just remind us, didn't include the health or the actions underneath the health and wellness pillar. So that is an outlying need that we have to address. But from the 39 actions that we reviewed, 22 actions were identified as high priority for strengthening Vermont's outdoor recreation economy. So that was out of a high, medium, low evaluation. So 22 actions were high. 7 of those actions were identified for VOREC to lead. So actually, as a program, leading progress on these identified actions. 4 were new actions that were identified through the conversations we had that weren't in the 2018 action plan. And then there was 1 topic recommended for future discussion. So the actions that were recommended for VOREC to lead, and I'll just roll through them really quick, were create a Vermont outdoor ethic that captures stewardship principles, convene conversations about and support development of accurate and clear public information materials for outdoor recreation users, kickstart conversations about outdoor recreation programming in K-12 and post-secondary schools, encourage regional networks of recreation assets and infrastructure projects that connect communities, improve access to public lands and waterways, identify and support equitable access to outdoor recreation opportunities, and designate outdoor recreation businesses as a key industry within Vermont's economic development strategy. So I want to pause there and, again, these are actions that were identified for us as a program to lead. So this is us taking a leadership role, working with partners to make these happen. And I just want to pause to see if anyone has questions or observations about those actions, because these are actions we're saying us as a program, we want to take the lead on. And of course, you can follow up with me through email, and I'll send these slides out so you will have time to further digest.
Jackie, I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do I think about the actions recommended to lead in conjunction with the items that were deemed high priority? Like, is there connectivity there? The reason I ask is because there were a lot of items deemed high priority. So I'm thinking about how to think about prioritization and bandwidth and what's really possible. Just allowing us to get very clear on I think really what it is focus and prioritization. And if I'm understanding correctly, the opportunity we have with Jennifer, there might be some opportunity there to help us really get focused to be able to get some things accomplished.
Yep, exactly. So the 22 high priority items were, these are high priority for strengthening Vermont's outdoor recreation economy, not necessarily actions that VOREC would be leading, but VOREC would be a part of in partnership. So, those actions, we had conversations about, would VOREC lead this action or not? And if VOREC's not the leader, who would be a good leader? And so those other, I terrible at math, but the not seven actions were ones that we said we probably shouldn't be the lead on these, but they should be actions that we work on. And this is a place to start. So I think the action plan assessment is our place to start work planning, because what we're hoping comes out of this is that we have conversations about how do we prioritize these? What are our goals for the next 5 years, 10 years? And how do we as a program lead on these things? And how do we as a program partner with our partners to help facilitate these actions moving forward? So that's how I've been thinking about the outcomes of this activity, is like, this is just our initial sort of brainstorm of what the important actions we should be thinking about are. And we're going to take these into action planning and start to have conversations with partners, start to work with SCORP on, how do we get feedback on these actions we've identified. And I'll talk a little bit more about that once we get into the high level work plan that we're proposing.
Got it. And so I think what I'm hearing is that minimally that there would be some sort of connection to things that we think are high priority before we were to start to act on some of these actions that we've deemed are ours to lead.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So we're not making decisions at this time. I just, these are the initial outcomes. And if there's any concerns or initial feedback from the discussions we had in October and April, then I would want to capture that. But
got it.
Jackie, I think it's also helpful to think about like what we didn't have from the 2018 action plan was really that level of granularity of like, is this VOREC's role to advance, or is it VOREC's role to identify the partners that make sense to lead this and have those conversations and determine what it means for VOREC to support those organizations advancing these priorities. So I think what Jackie's describing is taking the 2018 actions that step further and better understanding like VOREC can't and shouldn't do it all. How do we pivot those actions into something that's more appropriate to what steps VOREC can take to help see progress in these places where we aren't the logical lead? I love that you're asking that question. I think it's so great.
all right, Shelby, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, and thank you for the recap here and sort of the funnel process that was undertaken at the last meeting. I wasn't able to attend, unfortunately, and it sounds like there was just a ton of great work that went into that. And I see some of the issues I would have wanted to weigh in here on on the leadership shortlist. So I'm curious, again, this isn't an answer to your specific question, but it might relate a bit to Fraser's and the topic we just touched on. But was there a sense that like 7 was the golden number based on steering committee size and capacity, or was it just kind of like we couldn't narrow it, the group couldn't narrow it down any further beyond 7? And I'm kind of curious if how much of these overlap with priorities of FBR as an agency right now and where there's like synergy.
Yeah, I think those are really great questions, Shelby. There was no like magic number we were aiming for. It was mostly just like let's see where we are. Let's see what comes out of this. And what came out of it was 7 actions at this point that we've identified. But obviously, there's a lot of thought that needs to go into, are these the right 7? Are 7 reasonable? How do we want to redefine that potentially? So again, this is just a starting place and kind of where we got to in the last conversation. But I think all of your questions are great and ones that I want us to think about as we head into action planning.
Yeah, and one thing that jumps to mind, or a few reactions that jump to mind now, is that I think 7's a lot for leadership, but I think mapping where there may actually be, I mean, like SCORP is a great example where there's a lot of capacity being dedicated by FPR, in that process. And so what is VOREC kind of feathering into existing kind of leadership at the agency level? And so that's kind of one example. And where are there places where VOREC, among the leadership list, where VOREC might need to kind of be more foundational? And I think there are other examples of where there's other key partners within the ecosystem, maybe that are in co-lead places or even in more of a leadership place. So I think mapping that out to kind of actually maybe even narrow in a list of 3 things where there's kind of a void with respect to other partners might be interesting. I like to think in 3s, but the and sort of seeing what momentum we could build among steering committee members to raise hands. I think given our size and 7 topics, I think we're going to get spread really thin pretty fast.
Yeah, I totally agree with you and appreciate your feedback here. It's great. It's great to get this in the moment. And I think when we look at the work plan, what I'd like to do is think about, does our plan for VOREC action planning address some of the things that you're noticing? And are there things we're not thinking about yet that might help us get to that point that you're talking about, Shelby, with maybe that narrower list of roles and goals and what the VOREC program should really be taking on versus partners. All right.
It also strikes me that, Jackie, I don't know if you explicitly stated this in your sort of launch into the assessment, but we haven't really talked timeline either, and where we land with, what priorities exist for VOREC to take a leadership role on could be informed by what timeline we're thinking that these need to take place within.
Definitely.
And I'll just add that one of the things that we had talked about in initial discussions was for action planning, you've got 7 potential leadership roles, but they're quite different in terms of their level of specificity. Some are very broad statements that are kind of a reason for being for an organization, and then some are very sort of subject specific or timeline specific or action specific. So figuring out within those how to kind of equalize those scopes and which things are like improving access to public lands and waterways. Does VOREC take a leadership on which aspect of that? So I think that would help you also to figure out where that organizational gap analysis is lent, how you're talking about who's not doing this, where are the real missing pieces, and then add that specificity to those that helps you feel like you have more capacity and could actually feasibly achieve that, taking it from a giant goal to, well, what does that actually mean? Which I think is really central to this whole process.
Yeah.
Jackie, if I could add one more thing.
Go ahead, Fraser.
It's been really interesting exercise, learning about this assessment and its origins and how it's kind of remained relevant over the years. And there's things that have come off, but a lot has stayed on as we've prioritized and talked through this. And still, we're working on this by committee, and it's a rather large committee, and it's hard to. I think there comes a point where we need to get clear on potentially decision makers, and that could be a smaller group so that we can move forward at the pace we want to move forward. It will be hard to make decisions by committee, which is how we've been kind of organized so far. But I think we might be in a moment to think about how to progress it differently with a set of decision makers or a subset of decision makers.
I love that idea, Fraser, and it's something I've thought a little bit about and definitely would love to think about further with you all, especially as we go through kind of what are the different phases of this work over the next year or so, and how might we best support that and make sure steering committee members are engaged appropriately and able to weigh in on all of this work that we're important work that we're going to be doing together. All right, I'm going to move forward just so we can get to the work plan. I also just wanted to show you the new actions that were suggested to add. Again, I'll send these out after the meeting so you can take a closer look. But I thought it was, there was some conversation about, well, this action didn't quite capture this thing, and we've made progress on that action, and now we're in a different phase. So I think these new actions reflect some of that, like providing education about landowner liability projections, data collection to show the success from communities who have received VOREC funding. So I think it's really interesting to look at those new suggestions. And then there were in our conversations some roles that started to emerge for VOREC in supporting partners, being a resource for funding, identifying and supporting partnerships between groups, between communities, making sure the right stakeholders are a part of the conversations, and facilitating research on key questions. Those all came up a lot in the notes. And then there was one proposed topic, which I think is not a surprise from the conversation that we've been having here today, but really working to incorporate equity and inclusion throughout the VOREC program and VOREC's work. So really digging into that in a more active way as we start to think about action planning and the future of the program. So some next steps from here, and we'll talk about the work plan, but I am going to be integrating recommended changes to the actions unless I hear otherwise from you. So again, that's that full spreadsheet that I sent to you. There are some notes in red text underneath the actions with the recommendations for changes. If I don't hear anything, I'm going to move forward with incorporating those changes and consider them accepted. There will be more opportunity to discuss these actions, I think plenty over the next year, but for the sake of moving us forward, I'm just going to go ahead and accept them unless you have any concerns. We do need, like I said, to outline actions underneath our health and wellness pillar. There were really only maybe 2 identified in the 2018 action plan. So that is something that I think we'll be thinking about as we enter into action planning. And there is, I think from here, the next step is thinking more strategically about our partners who we're engaging and working on in this work, and on these identified actions that we have been assessing. So those are some next steps that relate specifically to this action plan assessment and how I think we'll move this conversation forward. Any questions before I move into the work plan and what I've been talking about with Jennifer and Claire and others at FPR? Great. Okay. So let's talk about this work plan. As a reminder, so we've been talking about this for a while. We started talking about it last year, VOREC 2.0. How do we want the VOREC program to look? And how do we, how do we live into and better embody our purpose and support Vermont's outdoor recreation economy through public and private partnerships? So really that is the goal of this action plan update, is to pull together a framework that helps us as a program do that. some desired outcomes from this project. And I've shared some of this with you all in previous meetings, but have gotten a little clearer on it with the help of Jennifer and the RTCA program. Is an achievable 10-year vision for Vermont's outdoor recreation economy, an improved understanding of working relationships and opportunities for collaboration with partners, a stronger framework for making funding investments and tracking our effectiveness, an engaging and useful plan that can be used as a communication and outreach tool for growing the VOREC network and communicating to the governor and the legislature about the VOREC program. So I think this is probably also not a surprise as we've walked through our meeting today. There are so many concurrent planning processes happening right now. SCORP, there's the work that the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council is doing. The Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance, as Mark shared, has been engaging in strategic planning. You heard Heather talk about the Department of Tourism and Marketing and those economic impact studies that they're going to be completing. There's also the Forest Futures Roadmap. Vermont State Parks has been doing a modernization study. There's this steering committee that VHCB is leading for H126 that Becca mentioned. So there's a lot happening in this space right now, which is really exciting and presents this great opportunity for our action planning to add a lot of value to the work that that everyone, I think, is thinking about over the next year. In particular, I think for me, I zoom in on how do we make the biggest impact in the alignment between the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan and VOREC action planning. I've been able to have some really great conversations with Becca and Claire about brainstorming how do these big planning documents and this planning work, how do we align them in a way that makes the most sense? Because I think, as maybe Shelby, you mentioned, like SCORP has all of these resources that come along with it, and it's an established tool, and how do we make the best benefit of that? So in my conversations with Claire and Becca, I think what we've come to is that SCORP right now it holds the 5-year vision for Vermont's outdoor recreation economy. So, it captures and tracks data on outdoor recreation infrastructure, participation, and desired projects. And it identifies priority areas for funding investments. So that's a real asset to VOREC's action planning work. And I think that bullet about holding the 5-year vision, I think that's something we're working towards. Like in the past, SCORP really hasn't been the embodiment of that vision, but the work that Claire is trying to do right now with Dexter's help is to make that, and the TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee, is to really improve that document and that resource and make it a more holistic, better vision for where we want to go with Vermont's outdoor recreation economy in the future. And then the idea is that if SCORP is holding the vision, then our VOREC action plan is what captures prioritized actions to achieve that vision. So right now it's a 5-year vision. We might hope that it's a 10-year vision if we can work it out with the National Park Service, but that's TBD. But that those actions are that we're working on towards that vision that's described in SCORP. And then the VOREC action plan is also defining how partners in the VOREC network, so our collective impact network, will activate to move forward on prioritized actions, as well as describing the role of the VOREC program, including state partners and the VOREC steering committee in working with those partners. So I'll pause there briefly before I sort of launch into what we've high level outlined for the next year, but any thoughts or questions related to that alignment or the goal or desired outcomes of this process?
Well, I'll just chime in to say all those suggestions I had, it sounds like you got to it. Well done.
Thanks, Shelby. Great. Okay. So then let's look at the high level plan. Like, where do we sort of foresee this process going over the next year? So we're here in the spring, summer of 2023. We've said we think the goal for this phase of work is to develop the process, identify partners, define partnerships, and complete the action plan assessment. So we've done a little bit of that work already. I shared some outcomes of that with you. For the VOREC program activities, we're really, working on completing that assessment, developing a work plan to define overall goals, process, and outcomes, identifying outdoor recreation economy partners, and preparing and issuing RFPs for outdoor recreation community data collection. So this is coming from lots of conversation we've had about the need to collect better data from recipients of VOREC community grants, and looking to use some of our fiscal year 23 funding to invest in that data collection. So just clarifying that last bullet. You see a couple of actions that we're anticipating SCORP will be doing during this time frame as well, this spring and summer. But I really want to highlight for you the steering committee role. So at this phase of work in where we are right now, spring, summer of 2023, we see that as really informing the process that we're developing. So participating in these bi-monthly meetings, reviewing and providing input on work plan, brainstorming outdoor recreation economy partners, and informing some of this language that we're going to be developing for RFPs. So we can talk a lot more about, I hope we'll talk a little bit about what that might look like. I would love your input on whether that's, we're trying to use our bi-monthly meetings in the most effective way to get to these things, or perhaps if we're trying to bring together some kind of smaller group to be more nimble on this kind of planning. So moving into the fall of 2023, so later this year, we would be looking at information gathering. And this is when things start to become a lot more active. For the VOREC program, it's, thinking about VOREC partnership outreach roles and having roles and responsibilities conversations. It's data collection on these outdoor recreation economy investments and exploring the role of the VOREC steering committee in the program. So really trying to define better how we work as a steering committee to support this action plan that we're creating. And you see a couple of things that SCORP will be working on, including some data collection, some focus groups to capture data needs. And at this phase of work, we're really thinking this is active engagement on behalf of the steering committee. So not only participating in bi-monthly meetings, but helping us schedule and participate in partnership meetings, sharing feedback on the SCORP input survey that's going to launch, as well as hopefully participating in some SCORP focus group work. So then moving into winter 2023, we've done some initial engagement and data collection. At this point in the process, we're looking at refining data, prioritizing actions, and developing the vision. So this is when we really start to align with SCORP activities, because again, we want those documents and those outcomes to be in alignment. So at this point in the process, we would foresee analyzing data collected through the SCORP and partnership meetings, working to integrate data and prioritize actions, and working on drafting a vision for the outdoor recreation economy in what will probably be 5 years, but again, if we're successful in those conversations with an actual Park Service, could be 10 years. So steering committee role, I think, this is where that question of, do we use our meetings most effectively? Do we have this small group? This is where that comes into play again, VOREC's informing, but also engaging, and, you see a couple of examples of what activities might look like: providing feedback on prioritized actions, helping draft the outdoor recreation economy vision, participating in other broad public outreach activities. And then early next year, so this is when we're taking all of the data we've collected, all of the feedback, and we're starting to finalize the prioritization of the actions VOREC is working on, and as well as this vision that we'll have through SCORP. So at this point, we're capturing partner feedback on the prioritization and vision. So going back to those partners we met with, getting their feedback on what we've come up out of these processes with, conducting multiple engagement activities to collect public input. So putting those back out for some public input and feedback, developing an updated action plan and SCORP report. So we do envision there'll be two separate documents, but one will be this, SCORP, and one will be sort of how we get there. And develop the partnership map, or a partnership map for the VOREC program network. So this is imagined to be like a landscape map of sorts of who's working in the outdoor recreation economy in Vermont, and who are they connected to. I think the vision is for it to be something that members of the public or the legislature or the governor could look at and see, like, these are the players that we're working with in our outdoor recreation economy. So again, at this point in the process, the steering committee is also informing and engaging and participating in feedback on updates to the action plan, providing feedback on this partnership map, and reviewing and providing feedback on the SCORP report. All right, so we are getting towards the end of our meeting, and we had a couple of other things, but I think it's really important to talk about this. So I wanted to pause before moving us forward and just capture your initial reactions, ideas about this draft work plan that we're pulling together.
Jackie, I think this is really, it's really helpful to see this laid out this way, and I really appreciate and value the structure that you're putting around this. I just want to reiterate a couple thoughts, and I think that this structure helps to deliver on some of these thoughts, but the idea that we're really clear around decision makers and support a process by which we can focus and prioritize and get really honest with ourselves about how many things we can realistically be working on feels really important. And that might be just the sequencing of them when we're over time. Not that we need to, take things off, which we might through conversation, but those things feel really critical to me. And then I have one really small thing, which is just a recommendation. And I don't know, it might only be me that is taken, that this kind of gets in my head, but I'm wondering about a rebranding, because 2018 action plan could be taken as old thinking, not relevant thinking. And simply removing 2018 might be the solve, but this is really thoughtful work, and it has been refreshed since 2018. And I would hate for people to think that it was based on solely 2018 thinking. Not that the thinking then was bad, it's just a while ago.
I love that you brought that up, Fraser, because it's something that I know has come up in conversations Claire, Becca, and I have had about how do we talk about this process in a way that, reflects the breadth of it and what we're trying to accomplish with it. And I totally agree, removing 2018 for sure, but also, is there a better name than the action plan, or is there a different way we want to talk about the work that we're doing to launch into this visioning that we're going, strategic planning that we're going to be doing? So I really appreciate that. And of course, I welcome any thoughts over email. And I think I would like to talk, Jennifer, probably with you about like how do we integrate that into the work that we're doing this summer, spring and summer, to get ready for launching this in the fall. So I thank you for sharing that, Fraser. Any other feedback or thoughts on these initial ideas? Okay, great. Well, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and recognize that that was a lot of information, and we're now here at 10:50 a.m. and we're planning to adjourn at 11. I had hoped to give you all an update on fiscal year 23 funding and timeline, and maybe I'll just do a really quick update now. But I do have a series of slides and that outline some of the thinking and discussion we've been having. So I'll think about how to share that information out to you all so you are aware of what we've been planning. But we have been in conversation, Becca and me, about the fiscal year 23 funding and taking the recommendations that were, or the feedback that was given by the work group we brought together earlier this year on the restructure of the program, what that might look like. And we've been talking with Commissioner Danny Fitzko about, how do we put that into action? What does it actually look like to stand that up? And I think we've gotten to a really good place. Just a couple of highlights. You heard me mention the data collection piece. I think we're removing that from the expectations of the grant program. It is still something we're planning to work on with some of this funding, along with municipal engagement in the work plan, if there's places we can use some of that funding to bring municipalities to the table. But for the structure of the grant program itself, we've been talking about it in 3 grant tracks. And those are implementation grants, which is what we kind of think of as the VOREC Community Grant Program. So that's shovel-ready projects, ready to go. They just need the funding to get going. Outdoor equity grants. So that would be a new track that we want to stand up, focused on non-municipal organizations who are thinking about, like, how do we implement a program or something that engages traditionally or historically underserved people in outdoor recreation, probably programming, events, those kinds of things. And I lay it out in a little more detail in the slides that I have for you all. And we've been exploring a partnership with Ideal Vermont on standing up that track of the grant program. And if you don't know who Ideal Vermont is, they are within the state's Office of it's the Racial Equity Panel or Advisory Panel that's bringing together that program within the state of Vermont, and really interesting organization. And I encourage you to look them up and research a little more information about them. But we've been talking with them about helping us support standing up this grant track. And then the 3rd grant track we've been talking about is project development grants. And as a reminder, those are to help those municipalities who might not be shovel ready, might not have gotten all of their permits, might not have completed all preliminary land acquisition activities, things of that nature. This would be a grant track that we could point people to receive support to work on those, to do those activities, to get them to the point of being shovel ready, so they could come back to the implementation grant track and apply for that implementation funding. So we're really excited about this structure and think that it creates this great continuum where municipalities can enter into our program and move their projects forward to completion. better than what we've been doing in the past. Timeline-wise, we've been talking about launching a press release at the end of this month to share information with communities about this restructure and this format. We've also been doing work planning for standing up the implementation grant track because we have a lot of the information to do that, to stand that up a little more quickly. And we're tentatively looking at early August for that grant track launching and releasing a notification of funding for people to apply. And there are some other key deadlines that we've been thinking about, but again, I'll try and share those out in the slides that I send following this meeting. All right, so I'll pause there and see if anyone has questions or reactions, and then I'm going to start to wrap us up. Great. All right, so then with that, I would like to move us into public comment. I believe there are some members of the public joining us and have been patiently sitting in and listening. And I'd just like to open the floor up for any thoughts or comments or questions that you would like to share with steering committee members. Okay. And seeing none, I will go to other business and see if there's anything we haven't been able to cover today that anyone wants to shout out before we adjourn.
Jackie, the one thing I would love as note taker would be to have the person joining us on the phone just come off mute and introduce themselves so that we could take note of their participation in the meeting in the minutes.
This is Nick Bennett, if I think I'm the only person on the phone.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, thanks for a great meeting.
Thanks, Nick. All right, any other business? I think we covered a lot today. Cool. All right, well, like I said, I'm taking some action items. I'll be sharing some of the slides out with you, and I'm trying to make sure that I get more information about the fiscal year 23 funding plans that we've been working on out to you as well, so that you're informed and aren't surprised when you see that press release go out at the end of the month, talking about the restructure of the program. As always, thank you all for taking the time to be here and to participate. I think as we move forward into this action planning phase, I know there's a lot of work that we're going to be thinking about and doing together. And I welcome any thoughts and feedback you have as we start to flesh out that work plan in more detail. And I anticipate when we come back together for our August meeting, which will be in person, that I think we'll be having some really good conversations, brainstorming about some of these partnership opportunities we're thinking about. And yeah, I'm excited to think more with Jennifer about where we go from there. So thank you all, and I hope you have a great weekend. And
Jackie,
yeah.
do we have the August date calendared?
We do, yes.
Okay,
I can.
great.
It's the second Friday of the month.
Friday.
Yeah,
Okay,
great. So
thank you.
I look forward to sharing more information with you guys about that and seeing you then. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks all. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.